Hello, I'm Pierce Brown, the author.
You know Pan's Labyrinth.
Reds, golds,
Obsidians.
lend us your gory damn ears. Welcome back to the Brothers Gwynne. Today we are doing a review of the first instalment of the Red Rising Saga, which is called Red Rising. This is the first instalment by author Pierce Brown, who I believe this was it. Yes, it was his debut, and he has written.
I believe you are correct. Yes, you are correct.
I am correct. Don't doubt myself. There are 5 books in this so far. There's a trilogy, and then there's 2 more that are leading on, and there will be
written, isn't it?
The final has been written, so
Yes.
it's basically 2 trilogies that fit together, and they could be a series of 6 if you put them together as well.
So this review will be like some of our other reviews on the channel. We will split it down into different sections where we can really break down the book into areas that we really enjoyed. Maybe that could have a little bit of work for us, our opinions, of course, and what we're looking forward to in the next one. Now, this is book 1 in a series. We won't be talking about spoilers. At the end, when we finish the trilogy, well, I've read it. When you've finished the trilogy, we will do a spoiler talk about if we really love it, if you love it as well, then we will talk about why you should read this trilogy as opposed to maybe other books, why this should go up in your TBR. But firstly, let's talk about Pierce Brown as an author.
Hello, I'm Pierce Brown, the author of the Red Rising Saga, a New York Times #1 bestseller. In my books, you'll find stories of men and women finding their inner strength when all seems lost. You'll also find me exploring themes of love, violence, hope, and power, what it means, why people seek it, and how they hold on to it. And now we'll read a blurb from Red Rising.
The Earth is dying. Darrow is red, a miner in the interior of Mars. His mission is to extract enough precious elements to one day tame the surface of the planet and allow humans to live on it. The Reds are humanity's last hope. Or so it appears, until the day Darrow discovers it's all a lie, that Mars has been habitable and inhabited for generations by a class of people calling themselves the Golds. A class of people who look down at Darrow and his fellows as slave labour, to be exploited and worked to death without a second thought. Until the day Darrow, with the help of a mysterious group of rebels, disguises himself as a Gold and infiltrates their command school, intent on taking down his oppressors from the inside. But the command school is a battlefield, and Darrow isn't the only student with an agenda.
So that is a pretty awesome sounding blurb. So, just a quick summary. Red Rising is a sci-fi soap opera.
Yeah? Soap opera. Do you mean space opera? It's a sci-fi version of EastEnders.
Not quite. Maybe if EastEnders had the Hunger Games.
Maybe.
So Red Rising is pretty epic, and it explores a very unique culture. And that is what we'll talk about as we go further into this review. But as always, we're going to break it into the different subjects of the book.
Yep.
And we're going to start with characters.
Yes, so characters. The main protagonist is Darrow, and it's told from his point of view in first person. Now, straight away, that was quite a shift for me. I'm not used to reading first person. And although I think Pierce Brown did a really good job with it, I think I always prefer books that are in third person, because especially a book like this, which we'll get onto later when we talk about plot, has lots of twists. You want to see the twists rather than be in the head of the main character and actually know what's happening. And you want to have a bit more mystery, I think. Even though the twists were really good, I think there could have been a bit more mystery, and the tension could have been ramped up maybe to 11 rather than 10.
Yeah, I think that the characters are one of the strongest parts of Red Rising. As we'll go on, we'll praise and criticise different parts, but I think that Darrow, I think that he begun a bit plain for the first half, but then it got into the latter phases, and I really thought that he developed, and that events really changed who he was. I thought at the beginning that very tragic events occur, and you see that he's angry and vengeful, but I don't think it really changes his character too much.
No.
But later on, It really does, in the part which we'll talk about later, which is, it seems to be Hunger Games inspired, even though it isn't a YA read.
Yeah, his personality seemed to shift halfway through to a very grim, pragmatic, and quite a dark person.
Yeah.
And what I like is how, some of the time, he feels a little bit like Kavoth, where everything goes right for him. And other times, he does some pretty bad stuff. You know, he doesn't have the best of morals. Admittedly, he is part of taking down a regime that is taking away his own rights. So he's not really going to be the most happiest and the nicest of chaps, to be honest. Which
it's the idea that you can't get through being pure.
Yeah, exactly.
To rise to the top, you have to do bad things.
Yes, yeah, you got to fight fire with fire, and he definitely has a lot of fire up his sleeve. I think another really strong point of this was the side characters.
Yeah, the surrounding cast was fantastic.
Yeah, most of them anyway. Some of them, obviously, when you've got quite a large cast, which just does, some of them blend into one, some of them don't really feel as if they're 3D characters, do they? But I think most of them felt really authentic and quite unique. And, you know, you've got characters like Severo, who was definitely a fan favourite
he's awesome.
in the whole Red Rising community. You know, and you've got many other characters that are pretty unique to this world. It's not quite to the Joe Abercrombie extent where if they were talking, then you know, if you read a line of their dialogue, you know who it would be who's actually talking. But I think Pierce Brown still did a really good job.
Yeah, I think that there's characters like Severo and Titus who they start a bit as caricatures, but a bit like Darrow, they really evolve into something different and something really wonderful. And also with the characters, I think that's one of the strengths of Red Rising, which you don't find with many books, is you fear for them. Pierce Brown is not afraid to kill key characters or those who you think will survive to the end. I remember being halfway through thinking, oh my word, this person has just died, and then 10 pages after, someone else has just died, and I really thought that they would remain to the end. And I think that by killing characters like that, you know that everyone is in danger.
Yeah, no one's safe.
Exactly, and I think it really helps enhance the characterization that you do have. And I think that Mustang, Titus, Severo, you hate some of them, you really like some of them, and some of them really, they're very fantastic original molds by the end of this story. I'd say that there's a bit of disparity, as I'll say over a lot of the other parts of Red Rising as well, between the beginning and end. I think that by the end, Pierce Brown has found his voice and his characters, and they're all very unique. But at the beginning, as I said, they start a bit like caricatures.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think that if you do read the beginning of Red Rising and don't really click, push on, because it does get a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. I think the ending is really strong. And the antagonists Red Rising sets up for the next two books are really strong, I think. Definitely, you can tell they're going to give Darrow a lot of jip over the next two books. As British way possible as phrasing it. But yeah, no, I definitely think the antagonists were good. The protagonist was also really good, Darrow. I mean, usually you're not too keen on the main character, are you? Like the chosen one. Like people rarely say Harry Potter's their favourite character out there was. People rarely say Frodo's the favourite character.
Or Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, exactly. But I think Darrow has just a little bit more about him than perhaps those kinds of characters where they're always thinking of the right thing to do. Darrow's never thinking of the right thing to do. He's always thinking of what's going to get him to his next goal, which felt very real. And especially in a sci-fi where things obviously is very fantastical and it's very different to what we usually read, to have something that is so human made it feel very grounded.
Yeah, he's driven by this quest for vengeance.
Yeah.
And as we said, that means he has to do bad things. And whilst at times he doesn't want to, he will do it. And he doesn't really have regrets because he sees this as the only way to succeed. And it's a bit like Tau in The Rage of Dragons with Evan Winter's first installment of The Burning. These characters, they feel very human. They're good people at heart, but they do a lot of bad things.
Yeah.
And Darrow is another one of those.
So on to prose then. William, what did you think of Pierce Brown's prose?
I think the prose was really great. I thought that this was a really strong aspect. We both listened to this on audiobook.
Yeah.
And Tim Gerald Reynolds' narration was fantastic, but you can see even that narration, that was enhanced because of the lyrical prose. I would say it is lyrical at times. I think that it fluctuates slightly, but it's very smooth, languid, and it is really easy to read. Yeah, I noticed that Pierce Brown really does love his allusions as well, figures of our own historical past, which makes sense as it is a sci-fi set in the future. They would have access to our past, I guess. There was a rousing speech where I think that I noticed that Emiliano Zapata was quoted. It's better to live on your feet than to die on your knees. As you're wearing, very fitting. It's not like we organised that at all.
Not at all. Purely organic.
Oh yeah, naturally. And within the same speech, I think there was a quote from Rousseau about education and equality, and then also parts of Charlie Chaplin's speech from The Great Dictator, which is a very rousing speech, one of my favourites out there. And I'm sure that there are many that I missed out on, but they're just a few that kind of that I picked up in my ears. And I thought that was really great. And it just adds to the flavour and richness of Pierce Brown's prose.
Yeah, my knowledge is not as widespread as William's, so I didn't really pick up on any of those features of Pierce Brown's writing, which I really enjoyed when William told me that for the first time. I thought that was excellent. That I'm able to read alongside someone who can pick out those details. Now,
I just got lucky because I was studying.
But you're well read,
research.
so it's good. It's really great, and you also helped me as well. So thank you, Will. But also, I didn't really notice as much with the prose. It didn't really affect me as much as I think William enjoyed it a bit more than I did. I think I was so taken aback that it was first person that it took me quite a while to adjust to it. But when I think back on it, it was very accessible, very easy to read, very easy to listen to, and it felt very natural. And I did really enjoy it. I think is a nice flowing style that Pierce Brown has to it that felt very logical, and also it wasn't the way he writes wasn't going to the surroundings. Then that's something, then something other.
Yeah.
It kind of stayed in one vein, and it was very clear, wasn't it? And also Pierce Brown was. Even though it is first person and you've got all the plans ticking away in Darrow's brain, you could still see some of the twists that he had incorporated into it without Darrow kind of latching onto them, which was really good. So especially as a first person book, it must have been a little bit trickier to have as hard hitting parts. But moving on, the next part is
plot.
So
this is where I think. Again, I'm going to talk about the disparity between the first and second half. I think the first half, it begins really well, and then it reaches phase, I won't say because this is spoiler free, but Darrow has a pretty life-changing event, and I thought the plot faltered a lot. I think it was a lot of exposition, but it did serve to a good end because it set up the latter half where there were no pauses and breaks, and it was a very regular, very great pace for the rest of the story. But I think that it did falter, and again I'd say that if you do reach that and don't want to carry on, push past it, because the second half, as you can tell a bit from the blurb, it seems inspired from the Hunger Games, but without the YA-esque parts of it, if you're worried about that. This is a lot grittier, grimmer. Anything else beginning with G I can think of?
I was going to say jank.
Not what I was thinking. Okay, no. But I thought that the plot, it does focus more on character, and I think there is the overarching plot line of taking down this regime of the reds versus golds and all the other colours, which we'll talk about later on in the world building. But I thought it was one of the weaker aspects. I think whilst recording this, I have listened to Golden Sun as well, and I'd say that it takes leaps and bounds forward in progress for the plot. But in Red Rising, I would say that the plot is weaker.
Yeah, I like the way it began with the life-changing event for Darrow. It felt very kind of standard bookish, but it's a great trope, if you will. Although I don't really like the word trope because, hey-ho, people use it negatively. But
they're tropes for a reason.
It was done really well, I think. And once you read it, you'll see a lot of similarities between this and other books and many other genres as well. I agree with him. I think the plot slightly faltered towards the middle half. Usually I'm a big fan of training montages, but this wasn't done too... I think Pierce Brown was trying to get to the bit he was excited about, maybe, and he wasn't as focused on how Darrow prepares to, as it says on the blurb, to infiltrate the Gold Society, which Darrow does do. And I like a fast-moving book as much as The Next Man, unless The Next Man is Usain Bolt. But... I think it could have taken its time a little bit more and stretched out the middle the middle third, would you say?
Yeah.
The second quarter. If
Yeah,
we're
maybe.
getting technical, I don't know. And just kind of have a bit more that's grounded, establish Darrow a bit more before he makes this journey, because he doesn't feel to, like you said, William, earlier with the characters, he doesn't feel to change too much till later on.
Yeah.
The plot later on is like a really deathly version of King of the Hill. Imagine you're playing Halo, and it's really, really dark. And you've got your squads, you've got your mates, but it is very Hunger Games-esque, but I think that's a great, I love that whole premise. Any battle royale, I think I'm there for it. I really like the idea of it. I think it was done really successfully.
And this is a really different take on
absolutely
it as well.
There were twists, there were turns, there were conflicts, there were nice mellow moments, there were moments where you got to grips with other characters and you met new people were dying. I think the ending of this book had a lot of momentum and carried it forwards into Golden Sun, which we will be talking about another time, but I think the whole plot was actually really enjoyable.
And now next we'll move on to the action, which is linked to prose and plot, but we break it down again because action is a significant part of Red Rising.
And it was bloody damn bloody, wasn't it?
It was gory damn good. Red Rising, the action, I think Pierce Brown did really well. I think that he does alter his prose quite a lot so that you do feel the momentum.
Becomes a bit more of a visceral experience.
Yeah,
it?
Darrow is a very clever individual, and as such, he's very often moulding over everything that's going on, and you feel that kind of flowing movement in the prose. But then when action takes grip, you feel the tension, I think, and especially I did. I'm not sure if you did.
Yeah.
But and I think that it is really great, and this was again enhanced by the narration. Tim Gerald Reynolds was really great at those peaks and troughs and really getting across the tone of each scene, and I think that the action was really well done. We have a wide variety from 1v1s to someone dying on their own trying to survive to large scale combat. Well, yeah, kind of large scale, a few hundred people.
It's pretty large.
That is pretty large compared to anything I've witnessed,
Yeah.
anyway. And I think that Pierce Brown did really well with all of them. He manages to paint the overall picture whilst maintaining the characterization and importance of plot playing into this, so that none of that gets lost during the action. I think he is really successful in that.
Yeah, I think that I think the action was definitely to further the plot, and it was used to great effect. The beats of the action, pardon the pun, if you will, were really nicely executed. Again, pardon the pun. I'm not prepared for this whatsoever. It's just off the cusp. But I think the action was
Just
really
getting a
good.
point across.
I'm not really used to sci-fi combat. I played Mass Effect and the Halo, things like that. But this was very different. This was more of a Dune style combat, I think. And I love Dune, and you can also see lots of similarities between Dune, between the different houses that are rivals as well, and also Paul/Darrow being amazing at everything. But anyway, I think the action was used really well. I think Pierce Brown, as you say, Will, shifted his prose a little bit to kind of mirror the tone and the feeling that he was going for. Very similar to Pathetic Fallacy, but using it in a prose style.
And now we'll go into the last section we have, which is world building. So, shall I talk first?
Yeah, go for it, Will.
Go ahead. I have a lot to say. I think the world building, I think that if we talk about just the setting Darrow exists in, I think that Pierce Brown builds the tone and atmosphere very well. I think that we really understand the situations that Darrow is presented with and what he is thrust into. Where I would say Red Rising lacks is the wider world building. I think initially we see the disparity of this regime and the inequality that is
feel like you see enough of it, do you?
That's exactly what I was going to say. The inequality is rife between the disparity between the different colours. So I think it is a very clever idea that your colour determines your rank.
I love that.
That is really
the golds,
clever.
The golds are kind of the pinnacle of society. The reds are the miners and the builders, and they kind of set up the worlds. Because it is all about colonisation, isn't it? Of other planets rather than Earth.
Yeah, you have the golds who are actually genetically enhanced, so they're very powerful, very strong, very handsome.
You're gold.
Have you been waiting the whole time to say that?
No.
And then you have the Reds, who are the manual labourers. And I think that at first this was explored very well. But then in terms of what Darrow is struggling with, I think that all gets lost a bit. And a bit of the momentum of the wider through line of the story gets lost as well.
Yeah, it'd be nice to be reminded of all of that throughout the book, wouldn't it? 'Cause
Yeah.
it feels like he kind of gets shut away just somewhere else, and you don't really see the effects of this kind of tyrannical regime from the Golds, what they're doing to all of the other different colours of associations, people.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say that I think that it's about balance, isn't it? You
Yeah.
don't want to be reminded every page, but also I would have liked to be reminded of it more. And I think that that presence of Darrow's motivation would have helped to emphasise his characterisation and attachment to him as well. So I thought that was lacking, but it is still there, and I think it's a really great idea. And obviously we can speak with hindsight, having read Golden Sun, and I say this is again an aspect that Pierce Brand fully explores in the next instalment. And even so, even though I am criticising the world building in this respect, it is still great. It's just that I thought there's so much potential, it could have gone a bit further, but that by no means is a great criticism, because it is such a unique and individual world that Pierce Brand already built in Red Rising.
Yeah, when I read sci-fi, I have really high expectations and wishes really for the world building, because it's compared to fantasy, it feels like there's even more potential, because it's more about exploring places that we can see in the sky, if you get a telescope or whatever, or the moon, but we haven't actually been to. Whereas fantasy, that usually mirrors something that's been on our Earth, doesn't it? I don't read, I'm not the most wide read of fantasy, but still, that's what I believe anyway. And I think Dune captures the world building perfectly, how it goes to a new planet, like when you watch Star Wars, how amazing the planets look and how different they are all from each other, and it just feels like Red Rising isn't really a living, breathing universe. I wouldn't say world, because it's set on different planets, and lots of it feels a little bit too convenient, as if this place springs up out of here just for this purpose, for this one section of the book, and then you don't really see or hear about it again, which to me doesn't feel as if it's kind of an environment that is living. So I think Pierce Brand could have done a little bit better about the world building, as in terms of what people go through. When you read a Joe Abercrombie book, you feel like they're all living their lives, everyone's got their own motivations, whereas this feels like it's all centred around Darrow. It's all revolving around the main character, rather than actually people doing things for their own reasons, and that links into the world as well. So things aren't there purely not for Darrow. So anyway, but I think I really love the idea of putting people into categories based on their colours, and someone breaking out of that. It's a great premise. It's something that lots of readers can get behind. And if you haven't read too much sci-fi, like we haven't really, then this is a great trilogy to start with.
So now we'll get into a summary. So I thought that Red Rising is a really great first instalment to a series that with Golden Sun gets a lot better. This is one of my first sci-fi reads, as you just said, Ed. I've read Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky before, which is brilliant.
Which is more like a horror.
But this is, arachnophobia times 10. And Red Rising is a very different take of sci-fi, but something that I thought was a really fantastic premise for a world and characters. Aspects could have been explored more, as we said with the world building, but I think that a really solid foundation is established in Red Rising, and I think that even though there are parts that aren't fully explored, this is a story that most people will really enjoy.
Yeah, I love the whole mythological references in this between the Romans. I think he mentions Greeks as well.
That kind of intellectual versus practical.
I think House Bologna is in play in this as well, so that's very Italian, isn't it? But you can see parallels between the worlds here and Earth, of course, and our history as well, which is I really enjoy that. It didn't feel like a secondary world, like sometimes fantasy, if it's based in the real world on Earth, then it feels a little bit like it's a secondary world, doesn't it? And you can't really have those references and get to grips with them as much as, whereas sci-fi is set in the future, it feels a bit more believable to me. I think there's a lot of potential here in this series. I've never loved it, unfortunately. I really liked it, but I would love to love it anyway. yeah, I think there's so much potential with Darrow as well, and all of the whole secondary cast make it such a better book as well. And Golden Sun really ramps up the pressure and the tenseness. Tension.
You can say that.
Tenseness. Tension.
Tenseness.
There we go. But yeah, I would definitely recommend Red Rising to everyone, really. It's a really enjoyable read. It's good for you to get to grips with the first person, there we go, perspective writing, and also experience some sci-fi.
Yeah, I think that I enjoyed the really. Oh,
we can't talk all of a sudden.
can't. I think I really enjoyed the first part of Red Rising. Then I enjoyed the second phase, and the third phase, I go as far as to say I loved it.
Right. Yeah.
I really loved the conclusion and final third to this story. And as such, if again, I'm going to say it again. I've said it 3 or 4 times already. If you do struggle with the beginning, do push on. I think it really is worth reading this from front to back and seeing if this is the story for you, because I think Pierce Brown, even in the prose, evolves as a writer throughout. And I think that he really gets to grip with Darrow's character.
And I'll read any book that is a fatal version of Capture the Flag.
So there we go. I hope you enjoyed our book review of Red Rising. So farewell from us. Truth and Courage, the Brothers Gwynne.
Yeah, let us know in the comments, guys, if you've enjoyed Red Rising, if you'll pick it up. We'd love to chat to more people about this trilogy. But in the meantime, stay safe. The Truth and Courage,
The Brothers Gwynne.
the Brothers Gwynne.